What's going on, guys? Kalipas Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the BLU G50 Mega. I'm going to be going over everything you need to know to help you decide if this is the right phone for you. Before we go any further, I do want to ask you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It helps out the channel a lot. And now, let's get into the video. So this phone has a 6.5-inch IPS LCD display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 270, and an aspect ratio of 20:9. We got a water drop notch up here for the front-facing camera, and this camera is 8 megapixels. I wouldn't say it looks bad per se, but compared to the hole punch design, I do think they could have done a lot better. The hole punch looks a lot cleaner than a water drop notch, and I do think the water drop notch in general is a more cheap look that I think manufacturers should start to move away from. Right now I have the brightness of the display at 100% and it looks really good. Even though the display is only 720p, the colors still look decently bright, and resolution wise, the image doesn't look bad either. The best thing about this display is definitely its size. Having a 6.5-inch display, it's not the biggest one out there, but it's definitely on the larger side, which means you're gonna get a good experience with content consumption, whether you're streaming videos, viewing photos, reading, all that kind of thing. Having a large display is of course going to be better because that means everything is just going to be bigger on the screen. So certain things, especially like reading where you have to see the details closer up, are just going to be that much easier and more pleasant. At the same time, the design of the phone itself is pretty thin, so even though it's a larger display, it's not too bulky, so it's still decently comfortable to hold in your hand and carry around in your pocket without any trouble. This phone has 32 gigabytes of internal storage with micro SD card expansion. Now, not a whole lot to say on this. It's a decent amount of storage for the average user. Nothing special, but also there's a lot worse in this price range. If you're a power user, you're gonna wanna find a device with more storage because 32 gigabytes, especially if most of the things that take up all your space, because 32 gigabytes, especially if you take up most of your space with apps, is really not a lot. But if you're an average user who only has a few apps on your phone, but then everything else is basically just a few photos and videos here and there, you're gonna be fine with the storage of this phone. But again, power users, definitely look into other devices that have more space, because if you have a bunch of different apps, especially the larger ones, and lots of photos and videos, even with the micro SD card expansion, you're probably gonna want more storage than this. There's no wireless charging with this phone, which is not really a surprise. Most phones in this price range especially, or any phone that's not a flagship for that matter, is not gonna have wireless charging. Now, I don't really know why, because I've seen phones that aren't flagship phones. In fact, they're pretty cheap phones out there that do have wireless charging. So I imagine it's not exactly a feature that's just too expensive to put in these cheap phones. Manufacturers just aren't. I guess it might not be a very popular feature. I've always thought it was cool, but I don't personally use it myself, so I couldn't really say. But it is interesting to see that certain features like dust and water resistance, NFC, and all that have been introduced to lower end phones. But that being said, it's really not a drawback that this phone doesn't have wireless charging, because pretty much no phone in this price range is gonna have it. Now, this phone does have a fingerprint scanner right here in the back and face unlock, so that is a huge advantage over lots of phones in the price range, because most phones in this price range only have one, either face unlock or a fingerprint scanner, but not both. Now, it's not super uncommon for an entry-level phone like this to have both, but it still is really nice to see. That way, if face unlock or a fingerprint scanner, whichever one, isn't working out for you at any given moment, you'll have a backup so you still won't have to put in a pin. And that being said, let's give this fingerprint scanner a try and see how well it works. There we go, one more time. And there we go. As you can see, this fingerprint scanner is real fast and responsive. No issues here at all. For the rear camera setup, this phone has a 12 megapixel main camera and a 12 megapixel depth sensing camera for portrait mode. Not a whole lot else. So there's no ultra wide camera, no macro camera. If you're into those advanced features, you're gonna be disappointed with this phone. It doesn't really have any of that, but it does take pretty nice photos for what it is. To give you an idea, This is the photo taken with the rear camera of the phone. This is gonna be that 12 megapixel main camera. No portrait mode or anything like that, just the straight up main camera. And I would say this photo looks really good. The colors look really nice, the details are good, the focus is on point. I see nothing wrong with this photo. Now, it's not flagship quality. It doesn't have any crazy definition or anything like that. But that being said, if you want to take photos that you're actually going to keep, maybe for social media or something like that, I would say this phone is going to get the job done. Now, this photo was actually taken with the portrait mode of the phone, and surprisingly, it turned out pretty good. A lot of the phones in this price range don't have very good portrait modes, if they even have portrait mode at all, but this one actually surprised me. Here's another portrait mode photo. This time I turned the depth all the way up, which is gonna blur things to the max. And I actually think this still came out really good. There's no abrupt blurring in the sense that it looks fake or anything. And overall, it blends really well. So if you're looking for a phone that has lots of different camera features like an ultra wide camera, telephoto lens, macro camera, all that kind of stuff, you are going to be disappointed with this phone because it doesn't have any of that. But if you just want to take pretty normal, good quality photos with the main camera and maybe some portrait photos, then this phone is going to be perfectly fine. For video, this phone can shoot 1080p videos in the rear camera and 720p in the front, which is a little bit low quality, I would say. Being limited to 720p in any of the cameras, even if it's just the front-facing camera, is gonna be a drawback because most phones, even entry-level phones, can shoot in 1080p all around. That being said, even the 1080p on this phone isn't very impressive. If you want to shoot any videos that you're going to keep, so pretty much anything beyond Snapchat, I would say you're probably going to want to look for a different device, because not only is the video quality pretty questionable on this phone, but the audio quality is as well. The microphone on this phone isn't the best, so the videos in general aren't really going to be very good. Internally, this phone is getting 2 gigabytes of RAM with the Unisoc SC9863A processor. I ran a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on this phone, and it came back with a single core score of 153 and a multi-core score of 774. So even though the RAM isn't the best, the processing power in general is actually pretty good. In addition to just being decent on paper, I've also had no performance issues with this phone, so I can say from experience it actually is pretty good and quite a bit faster than most phones in this price range. None of these phones are going to be meant for high performance activities, so don't expect to be able to do any type of video editing or high performance gaming or anything like that on these phones. Some things might work, but it's really not meant for it. That being said, if you're using your phone for more basic activities, like browsing the web, going on social media, sending text messages, making calls, all that sort of thing, then this phone is going to work out just fine for you. And it's probably going to be a lot better of an experience than a lot of other phones in this price range that aren't nearly as powerful. But what I would recommend is running a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on your current device and comparing it to this one to see if this phone would be an upgrade. This phone does have a pretty decent battery too, with a 4000 milliamp hour battery supporting 10 watt fast charging. It's not the biggest battery out there, but it's definitely going to give you plenty of battery life throughout the day and down the road in longevity. Unless you're using your phone a ton from early in the morning, you're probably not even going to have to worry about charging the phone during the day. And even if you do, the fast charging ensures that it's going to charge up a lot faster than phones that don't support fast charging. Now, one thing that might be seen as a drawback for this phone is that it does run on Android 10, and knowing BLU, you're probably not going to be getting any type of updates for this phone. So if you want the latest versions of Android as they come out, this is not going to be the device for you, because that's not going to happen. We're on Android 11 right now, getting close to Android 12, and this phone is still on Android 10. That being said, Android 10 is still a great software and it does run really well on this phone. So if not having the newest software doesn't bother you, then it's still going to be perfectly fine. So in conclusion, my final thoughts about the BLU G50 Mega. I would say this phone really is a decent entry-level phone. In certain areas, it's not too impressive, namely the camera setup. I would like to see an ultra-wide camera on there. The video quality, even though pretty much no entry-level phone is going to shoot amazing videos, at least having 1080p in both the cameras would be nice. And having Android 11 at least instead of Android 10 would be good too, because after all, we're almost on Android 10, we're almost on Android 12, so being that far behind in software is just not impressive. Other than that, I do think the phone is a really good phone for the price range and provides a great amount of value in 2021. But I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you found this information useful as well. If you did, don't forget to leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And as always, I will see you in the next video.